back just counted, and he said we have 70 people here.
Wow.
Mostly coming on such a cold night. Our first writer, Donald J. Hunt, grew up near Rochester, New York, where his love of writing was kindled, no pun intended, by writing contests in Mrs. Shannon's 5th grade class. Those early explorations into the imagination sparked a nagging passion to weave tales. That insistence ebbed and flowed, but never left. Don has taught at the middle school, high school, and university levels, and has compiled a lot of ideas, partial scraps of stories, and reams of notes. Jupiter Justice, his first novel, is available tonight for $10 at a table in the back. He lives in the suburbs of Chicago with his wife and 2 children, whom he's striving to indoctrinate into the ways of the Force and all things geek. The dog, Indiana Jones, and the cat, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, wholeheartedly support his endeavors. You can find out more about him at donaldjhunt.com. Don?
How's that? Good? Can you read the back? I'd like to thank Ann and Kevin for hosting this. It's a pretty amazing thing that they've been doing, and I'm honored to be here. I will do my best to read this. My voice is a little hoarse, but we'll see how it goes. A little background first. Our setting is a space station out near Jupiter. The main character, Rico Schroeder, is ex-military, and he has been drafted to help with a murder investigation. Reuben Holt, Chief of Security, is briefing Rico as we begin. And lastly, for those of you not familiar with science fiction, nanobots or nanobots are simply microscopic robots that are already starting to be made in 2016, if you didn't know that. Holt said, "A few things you should know before we get there. The victim, Hujat Malik, worked for Dubai Intergalactic. As such, they want one of their own in on the investigation." Rico stopped walking and stared at the man. "That's highly irregular. What if someone from Dubai is involved?" Holt walked a few more steps before realizing that Rico had stopped walking. "You've been out here a while now, Captain. You know how it works. Money makes most of the rules, and Dubai has a considerable amount of that. You'll have to do the best you can. The person they want on board seems decent enough, though. His file presents him in a good light. He's a doctor of sorts." Rico set his mouth in a flat line. He was not at all happy about being drafted into this mess without a say, much less having the investigation compromised from the get-go. However, he also knew Holt was right. Rico couldn't do anything about the situation except refuse to post, and he wouldn't do that, not if it meant letting a killer get away. "Fine, but I want it on record that I'm protesting this representative's involvement, and I object to being strong-armed into taking him." Holt inclined his head. Duly noted. Rico started to ask what doctor of sorts meant when they arrived outside a door with 2 armed guards. "I realize you have experience with this, but you still might want to brace yourself." The door whisked open, retracting into the wall to save space. The body laying on the bed caught his attention immediately because of the gruesome hole that erupted from his stomach. Folds of skin peeled back like a macabre flower in bloom. Rico caught the heavy, sweet tang of iron and copper from the blood that covered the bed and pooled on the floor. It was a grisly scene. As Rico examined the room from the doorway, another person walked up. But other than giving the man a quick glance, Rico remained focused on the tight, temporary quarters. Based on the wrinkles on his face and the extra weight around his midsection, the man on the bed was between the age of 40 and 50, Middle Eastern, dark hair, and dark complexion. Married by the ring on his finger. 2 daughters from the framed picture on his nightstand, possibly nieces or family friends, but a person does not usually bring a photo for an overnight, especially a standalone frame, unless it is someone important to them. The new arrival wore a heavy green Nehru-style suit with a satiny sheen to it, a high square collar with rounded lapels, no tie, a buttoned shirt and pearl buttons. He had a neatly trimmed mustache and beard and dark skin. His complexion was light, actually, but still darker than Rico's own. He had strong but not overstated cheekbones. He gave Rico the impression more of a Middle Eastern movie star or a shuttle buster than a real doctor. Brown eyes watched Rico, but gave nothing away. He stood tall, close to 2 meters in height, but not as tall as a spacer. Right, Rico said. Holt cleared his throat uncomfortably and gestured to the newcomer. This is Dr. Rahim Kuzbari, and this is Captain Federico Schroeder. Dr. Kuzbari is the Dubai Intergalactic Chemicals representative. He rode over from the Dubai station with a retired couple and the victim, Hujat Malik. The victim was one of their team members. Rico gave him a polite nod. Call me Rico. They shook hands. Any investigative experience, Rico asked him. I have a medical degree, and I have done autopsies, Kuzbari replied. Since I was already here, they assigned me to assist. Do you want me to preserve the scene? Kuzbari held up a 3D cam. Rico cast a glance over at him and nodded. Sure, that would be helpful. Kuzbari's preparedness surprised him, but Rico kept his face neutral. Efficient, maybe he'll be useful to have on the investigation, but he disliked having the Dubai doctor pushed onto his investigation. It compromised anything the man touched. Holt tipped his head, eyebrows knit together. Dr. Kuzbari is being modest. He's an expert in nanomedical programming. He's published papers on the topic. Really? Rico replied noncommittally. Were you and Dr. Malik friends? Kuzbari shook his head. No, I just met him on the trip over. Dubai Intergalactic is a large station, and I just came out from Earth 2 months ago. Rico gestured into the room. What can you tell me about the victim? Kuzbari answered, not too much. Physicist and engineer. What brought you over? Kuzbari, distracted by the body in the room, said, the shuttle. Then, realizing how that sounded, he gave an apologetic smile and added, I merely hitched a ride. I am giving a lecture in a few days on medical advances. They turned their attention to the corpse again. Rico said, it almost looks like he got hit from behind with some sort of archaic bullet. See the way the wound peels open? How big is that exit wound, 20 or 30 centimeters? Any idea what caused it? Kuzbari hesitated. Without closer examination, it would be hard to say. A rat could possibly do that. It's improbable, but we are close to the docks. He turned to Holt. Any rats in this area? Holt shook his head. Unlikely. They're around where there are ships. There are rats. But they tend to stay in the conduits, work tunnels, and near food storage. Probably some sort of weapon, Kuzbari said. Rico grunted. That reminds me of a shrapnel wound. I never saw one from a guy just laying in bed. Rico and Kuzbari slipped on steering gloves and booties and broke the seals, activating the heat pack. The covers instantly shrink-wrapped around their hands and feet, forming a thin, durable shield. Rico walked in and did a quick perusal all the way around. He preferred to take in the room before he examined the body. His instructor had told him, skim the surroundings first. Check the body, but don't let it distract you. He's dead. He's not going anywhere. Inspect the room, look for threats, watch for evidence. To the man's left, toward the wall, a book with Arabic letters on the cover lay on top of blood-soaked blankets. Pointing it out, Kuzbari said, Quran. Not an overly conservative Muslim, however. Rico gave him a quizzical expression. You can tell that from the Quran? No, the wedding ring. Although more accepted in recent years, for many they are still haram, that is to say, sinful. Enough that someone might kill over it? Kuzbari hesitated again. Possibly. Rico wondered if something as minor as a wedding ring, at least from his perspective, anyway, was enough to get a terrorist group such as Adala involved. It seemed dubious, but maybe someone went rogue, or they were trying to issue a warning to others, or both. Maybe someone stepped off the ring from crazy fanatic to just plain crazy. Kuzbari said, based on the wound location, he took a while to die. Stomach wounds can be particularly painful and slow to kill. This seems personal. Rico said, I agree. It sure seems gruesome enough to be personal, or perhaps to send a message. Kuzbari closed the dead man's eyes and said something Rico did not understand, presumably a prayer in Arabic. When he finished, with Rico's help, they spread out some sort of plastic sheet. They picked up the body of Hujat Malik and lowered it onto the plastic. The doctor unfolded a frame and placed it around the body. Next, he sprayed a chemical on the plastic, and it transformed into a hard, opaque shell to preserve any evidence. I better get down to the lab then and see what I can find out from the body's status, Kuzbari said. God bless you. He peeled out of his steering gloves and booties and tossed them into a reclamation chute. He pulled the sleeves of his shirt and jacket back into place with sharp tugs. Computer, provide Dr. Kuzbari with the route to the medical lab, Gold said. A red line with a matching arrow appeared on a nearby smart wall and pulsed its way down the corridor, leading the way to the lab. Kuzbari watched through the scope as the nanobots he'd injected into the hard carapace made their way over to the body. Although he'd worked with nanobots for years, he'd never ceased to be fascinated by them. It amazed him that they could fly through the air, actually move through a person's lungs, examining for signs of cancer or some other problem, and then, just as easily, enter through a blood vessel wall and swim through a person's bloodstream. They truly were miraculous inventions. Kuzbari leaned forward as the group of nanobots sent their observations of Malik's body to his terminal in real time. Something was wrong. As soon as their scans hit the cavity, a different cloud of nanobots rose up like a swarm of angry hornets. They charged Kuzbari's nanobots, and the video feeds all winked out. Panicked, he switched channels to the group he'd sent toward the head and had them pivot back. A score of nanobots raced toward his team. Ignoring the aggressors, the doctor zoomed in on the background, where a group of them had emerged from the body. Hundreds, if not thousands, of them were settling against the hard shell of the autopsy carapace. They were trying to cut their way through. Kuzbari stumbled back off his stool. "Oh no," he muttered as he scrambled for his black cloth bag. His normally calm reserve shattered. His nanobots must have triggered a defense response. Eliminate anyone probing the body. His head jerked up. Was that his imagination? Had he heard the shell cracking? Sweat broke out on his forehead as he pawed through his bag. Come on. He pulled out a rod that looked like a miniature satellite dish, his own invention. Finally, he pulled the trigger, sending an intense, rapid flux magnetic field at the carapace. He couldn't see the microscopic robots, of course, so he went over every millimeter of the shell. Then, just to be safe, he ran the field over his own body. He sat down on the floor, setting the degauser down next to him with trembling.